the time because at the end of the day, I'm stood there in a mask and some hood and some
Yeah,
kind of costume thing, and
exactly.
there's always that moment, before we go on where I like stop and have a really cold, sober word with myself. I'm like, what the fuck am I
What am
doing
I?
to
Yeah.
myself? And and then I have to remind myself that this is what I do. This is what I actually enjoy. What I fucking live for.
Cool.
And the people out there waiting to watch have paid to come see it.
All right, guys, what's up? This is Ryan with Ethereal Metal, and I'm here today with AV of Abduction, and we're going to be talking about existentialismus, if I'm pronouncing it correctly,
Yeah,
which is
you did.
releasing today.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, cool. Which is releasing today on Candlelight. So AV, thanks again so much for taking the time to chat. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. I'm glad we managed to sort it. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
definitely. All right,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. So I always like to start by asking, what have you personally been listening to lately?
The honest answer is I've not really been listening to any metal at all in the
Cool.
last year or so. I am someone who listens to metal normally all the time. It's the bread and butter. Um, but I think since I started the process of doing this record, I've just been really turned off by most new things.
Cool. Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, it's just I'm just not in the mood for it. So I mean, the stuff I've been listening to is a lot a lot of like female fronted pop, and like things like
Ah,
Ethel
that's cool.
Cain
Yeah.
and things like that. So yeah, and I'm really into quite a lot of this British kind of punk revival stuff at the minute.
Okay.
Um, so I quite like Idols and
Yeah.
bands like that. Amil and Sniffers are fucking great at the minute.
Cool.
Bands with real energy rather than pomp and ceremony.
Yeah.
So,
That's
they're probably
awesome.
the polar opposite to us, really.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah, that's what I've been listening to. There are some good UK bands and some good bands I've listened. We've kind of toured with and stuff to shout out, I suppose. Ulfa from Germany are a fucking amazing band.
Cool.
Andraka from the UK, our
Yep.
fellow conspirators, fucking amazing. But yeah, apart from that,
Awesome.
really, nothing metal.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. Sometimes you got to get out of the zone to get in it, right?
Yeah, I think
Cool.
so. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
part of the
cool.
process, I think. Yeah.
So talking about existentialized ismus was recorded as a full band for the first time. How did that shift in the recording process impact the sound and intensity of the album compared to previous work?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, the writing process and the kind of boiling of the cauldron is still it's still been me, it's still been me
Yeah.
in this room, um, and it's still my ideas, writing about my things in my experience. But it was just the right time to bring the guys who've been in the live band now for like 5 or 6 years, something like that. It was just the right time for those guys to go. Come on, let's get you on the record.
Cool. Cool.
So they did all their parts, all my parts, if you like. Um, but it does change it. Yeah, it's a different energy because it's no longer a solo endeavor. And
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
normally, I would normally crank out all the tracks for an album in the studio within 2 days. We'd have 2 days of studio book time.
Yeah.
So when I when I when I explain that to the other guys, they're sort of like, "What? Only 2 days?"
That's it. That's
Because
all
I
I
kind
have.
of work super fast when I'm by myself. But we did it. We did it in a little bit. We took a little bit longer, because the process was necessary for it. But yeah, that was a different experience. But they all fucking smashed it. They're amazing.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, I was gonna say that the end result was absolutely killer. So
yeah,
cool.
I'm really pleased.
Yeah, definitely. So the album feels incredibly immediate and aggressive, yet there are moments of space and atmosphere kind of woven throughout. How conscious were you of that balance when writing and producing the record?
Very conscious, actually.
Yeah,
Those two ends of the spectrum that you mentioned are are pretty like they're pretty crucial in how I write stuff. You know, I want it to be a flowing journey somehow.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, they're the sort of polar opposites. So those are really important. As to where they go and the song order and stuff, that's a little bit of a gamble until you've kind of put it all together and finished it, and you
yeah,
know, trying to make it fit on a side A and a side B, but the
yeah,
timings
for
overrun on
sure.
one, like it's a fucking
Yeah,
nightmare.
yeah.
So yeah, so it is very important, but it kind of all goes out the window at the end when
Right.
you just have to put it on one side. What order fits this side and what order fits that side?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the final track order is kind of like not how I originally intended it, but I mean, I've listened to it so many times in that order now, it just becomes the new order. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
it's fine.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. It's like, all right, I guess I'll work with
Yeah, yeah, pretty
it.
much.
Cool. And the vocal approach, for me on this album, it's a lot more unrestrained and expressive than in past work. Were
Yeah,
there specific moments in the recording process where you pushed yourself vocally in a way that you hadn't before?
yeah. The whole vocal process was like that. Really, I normally have like sort of 50 to 60% of it, like of the vocals, like written and exactly knowing exactly where things go.
Yeah.
And then I sort of experiment in the studio with the rest with a load of ideas and kind of piece the puzzle together as I go.
Mm.
Um, but I had much less of it planned this time around. So a lot more of it is kind of in the moment, in the studio experimentation, and not so much improvised, but like while I'm in that space, you know,
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
out new things and just trying to do stuff that I felt the song required, rather than sort of if you write a verse of lyrics, you kind of naturally write it to a rhythm, and then if you put that to a riff, it has to fit the riff, and they sort of have
yeah,
to work together. And
yeah.
I kind of wanted to move away from that a little bit, you know, just kind of see
Cool.
what comes out when we do it. So yeah, that process was a little different. Yeah, and I think the record benefits from it. It's that I've got a reasonable range of voices I can do and
Yeah.
singing styles and things. So just lent on what I thought the song needed at the time, really.
That's awesome.
So
That's cool.
yeah.
And you were kind of talking about the production as well. It kind of feels, raw, but it's very massive as well. Kind of capturing both clarity and chaos. What was the vision for how this album should sound compared to Black Blood?
Um, exactly like it does,
Oh,
and I mean
perfect.
that because
Nice.
we fucking spent ages trying to find the right person to do it, and you know, we had someone else in mind for a while, and that didn't quite work out to produce it. And then we looked at Torre Stjerner's work, and
Hmm.
obviously he's got a gigantic list of credits from Mayhem, Watain, Enslaved,
Yeah.
all the big names. And it was like, well, he's definitely going to do a good job. Can he do exactly what we want? And he was just the easiest person to work with. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
and he is a super nice guy. And I really appreciate that kind of European, Nordic, Germanic kind of honesty.
Yeah, for
Where
sure.
if I'm like, well, I want to try something like this, he's like, no, that will not work. And
And that's it.
okay, and you know, I push back against that all the time, but I actually respect the honesty. So yeah, but he was really easy to work with, and yeah, the end result is exactly how I wanted it to sound. Really,
Cool. No, that's
it's
awesome.
a bit unbelievable. I don't never really been in this position before,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's true. I promise.
Cool, cool. Nice. And kind of when you strip the music down to something more direct as you did on this album, there's nowhere to hide. Did that
Yeah.
create any challenges in making sure that the emotion and intensity hit as hard as they needed to?
Yeah, I think so. In the past work, I've particularly with the vocals, I've like buried things under lots of layers of effects and things,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's been the result, and that's kind of what I want to get. But there isn't really that much of that on this record.
exactly. Yeah,
There's things to make it sit in place, but there's nothing. There's no kind of spacey vocal effects or anything. So yeah, it's very much exposed, and that just goes back to your previous point about the the process
yeah.
and doing it in the moment. I like to challenge myself. I like to make things hard and see what I can come up with in at that point or in the moment. Um, so I think that's it's part of that really.
Yeah, and that's sometimes where the best work comes from, I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's risky. Obviously,
for
it's a
sure.
greater risk, but the reward is greater. So yeah, I think I've tried to do that.
Cool, cool.
It's hard to
Um,
reflect on it at the minute. It's all like it literally came out today. So
I was
it's
gonna
like,
say, yeah,
yeah, everybody's everybody's all the comments and everything. The internet's going a bit mental on my phone about it.
I'm
So it's
sure.
hard to find a reflection point today. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Cool. And obviously themes of frustration and delusionment running deep throughout the record. Were there any sonic choices, whether in the mixing or instrumentation or even the performance, that were made specifically to reflect that emotion?
um, yeah. I mean, there are moments in choice moments in riffs and how things move and change to sort of
Yeah.
reflect like triumph or despair, and
Hmm.
I've definitely consciously written stuff to try and make a specific emotional response.
Yeah.
um I've definitely done that throughout in different various different emotions, but um yeah, and the vocals, all of it really is there. There's a it's whatever the song needs, it just goes back to that, and
Yeah.
um so yeah, there are highs and there are lows and there are frustrating bits in between and there are all
Yeah,
sorts.
for sure. Yeah. Cool. So black metal often kind of thrives on atmosphere, yet on this album has a very tactical, almost like physical presence. How did you achieve the balance between immersive and confrontational?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a balance. That's a pendulum that's constantly swinging, and I
Yeah,
don't know
for
if I've
sure.
managed. If you're telling me I've managed to do it, that's great. I don't know if I managed to do it
No, for me, it definitely came out for me personally. Yeah, I
because
know
I love
everybody
both of
picks
those
up different
things.
things, but
Yeah, yeah, because I love both of those things. So I like total immersion in black metal, and
yeah,
I want it to be something that takes me somewhere far away. But I also like fucking emotion and anger and aggression, and something that's right up in your
let it
face.
lash out. Yeah,
So yeah, it's there are the record covers both of those areas
yeah,
plenty of
absolutely.
times. But yeah, how successful it is, I don't know.
Yeah,
If you like black metal that's totally immersive, then you probably won't like this album that much. But if you like Marduk and hard hitting stuff that's in your face, then you might feel the same because it's too immersive.
yeah, for sure.
I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see where the hammer falls on that. But yeah,
Yeah, for me personally, since I've had the promo about 3 weeks now, I've personally found that it strikes a really, really good balance between both for me
thank
personally.
you,
But
thank
yeah,
you.
no, you've spoken about black metal artists kind of falling into like self-parody. When recording and shaping this album, were there moments where you had to challenge yourself to avoid falling into that certain expectation?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
all the time. Because at the end of the day, I'm stood there in a mask and some hood and some
yeah,
kind of costume thing, and
exactly.
there's always that moment, before we go on where I like stop and have a really cold, sober word with myself. Like, what the fuck am I
What am I?
doing
Yeah.
with myself? And and then I have to remind myself that this is what I do. This is what I actually enjoy. What I fucking live for.
Cool.
And the people out there waiting to watch have paid to come see it, and they want to
Yeah,
see it, and they want to
yeah,
be part of it. And it's actually like just an extension of the self.
yeah.
So um, yeah, and the same is true for the recording process. Really, you do have those
Mhm.
moments, but um, yeah, I think as long as you're somewhat self-aware, you can avoid self-parody.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if you lack any self-awareness, you very very high chance you run the risk of becoming self-parody. I
That's
feel like
awesome.
I'm somewhat self-aware.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And So obviously you frame the lyrics in terms of both personal struggle and more of a broader critique of society. Were there any
Yeah.
moments in the writing process where those two perspectives clashed or even fed into each other in unexpected ways?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm always questioning myself and my actions. And, I've lived as part of the society I'm critiquing for many years.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good question. I suppose they do overlap quite a bit. Yeah. Um, I can't pinpoint a moment where
Hmm.
specifically in the lyrics, but I mean, yeah, there will be definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good question. You stumped me a little bit.
We'll come back to that. So obviously there's an undeniable weight to the sound of the record, both emotionally and sonically. Do you feel like this is the most honest representation of Abduction to date?
Yeah. Well, they're all honest representations. Of course they are. They're
Cool,
all
of
honest
course.
representations of that moment in time.
Yeah, like a
Um,
snapshot.
and yeah, and this moment in time, few things have changed. I've moved away from where I used to live, and now I live in the countryside with space, and where I grew up. So it's always going to be a reflection of where I am at the time,
Yeah,
one
yeah.
way or another.
Cool, cool. And so the album title itself suggests kind of like a deep engagement with just existential thought. Is there a particular existential idea or philosophy that kind of informed the shaping of the album?
Um, I have attempted to, but not successfully finished reading the Gulag Archipelago by
Ah,
Alexander
cool.
Solzhenitsyn.
Okay.
I will finish it eventually, but and a lot of the ideas around the Russian existentialist and German existentialist philosophers, obviously Nietzsche and people like that.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I think in terms of the critique of society as well, like what's missing is people's resilience to suffering, and
yeah.
I think that only comes through more suffering and
Sometimes, right?
adapting to it. An adaptation to the moment you're in, and so I think a lot of the points those guys made are pretty poignant today. Um, I think we exist in a kind of a cotton wool sort of instant dopamine fed society, and our kind of physiological response is to have a tantrum about it,
Yeah, yeah.
so, and the only thing that kind of counteracts all of that stuff, I've summarized that very shortly, but the only thing that really counteracts any of that stuff is building will and building resilience to those things by exposing yourself to
Exposing, yeah,
hardship. And we just don't have that ingrained in our generation anymore. That's what the Raises is about. The Raises is about my grandparents, and um, the they built this country with their bare hands. The
yeah,
dry stone walls that I walk past every day. As a fucking dry stone wall has been built by somebody by hand.
physically, yeah,
And my grandma growing up on this farm, carrying water every day up the hill and milk from the cows, and this relentless cycle of like physical toll that takes on your body that builds
yeah,
resilience. And we
yeah.
just none of us do anything like that anymore. Um, we complain when our tea's too cold, or it's just it's kind of pathetic when you start to compare the two.
When you compare,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
cool, cool. And with this being such a personal record, was there ever a point where any given emotion became like overwhelming in the creative process, whether in writing, recording, or in the performing of it?
Yeah, the moment that comes to mind is in "Truth is as sharp a sword as vengeance."
Yeah,
Um, that song's kind of about my worry for the future for my son.
okay.
Um, so, and the whole of that end section was kind of written in the studio. It was me and the drummer like, this song needs something at the end. It needs a third act, and I kind of came up with something that I had an idea of, and we put it together and almost improvised it to the point that's on the record. Um, and then the vocals are really just kind of like it's kind of like a spoken word, shouted word, whatever it is, but it's like a speech to
Yeah,
my future son,
Right,
and
right.
that's incredibly emotional. Like we've played that song a couple of times live, and like it genuinely makes me well up.
Oh,
If
of
I've got the
course.
breath left to do that bit at that point,
Yeah, right, right.
it's yeah, it's a real it's a real kind of like plea to the future for him.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's that moment. There are other moments where you get highs and shivers, and
yeah, for sure. But
just
that's
so
more.
pleased to not be in a boring cover band where you don't get anything like that. If we create this music for those moments, that's what I
Yeah,
do. I
absolutely.
want those moments to happen.
Cool. No, I really appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome. Thank you.
No
So my
worries.
last question, given how intense and consuming the album is as a piece of art, do you see this as a culmination of where Abduction has been heading, or is it simply just the next chapter in an ongoing evolution?
I think it's the next chapter in an ongoing evolution. I think
Cool.
it's closer to
Cool.
that. Yeah. This is just something that I have to do. I started doing, you know, to pass the time. I've been in plenty of bands many years ago and stuff, but writing my own thing my own way as an outlet is very, very, very important to everything, to
Yeah,
my
for sure.
well-being and my ego and everything, so it'll simply have to continue whether
That's
everyone
cool.
listens to it or not.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so
Great.
I think it's just the latest chapter in an ongoing saga of
Cool.
my life.
That's
I
awesome.
guess.
Yeah, yeah, cool. All right, Avi, thanks again so much for taking the time to chat. Everyone watching, just a reminder, Existentialismus is out today via Candlelight. Please make sure you give it a listen. There will be a link in the description below. Thank you again so much for today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Ryan. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. I'm just gonna